Welcome back, friends, to another episode of the Juicebox podcast. This episode originally aired on December 13th, 2016. It was episode 90 of the Juicebox podcast called Jesse Was Here. It's marked as a sensitive topic, and at the time I wrote, please consider not listening to this with a child present. Michelle has been a strong advocate in the diabetes world since her son Jesse was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2000 at the age of 3. But after the sudden loss of her son at age 13, she continues to advocate and educate. I'm running this today as part of Diabetes Awareness Month to memorialize Michelle, her husband Jeff, Josh and Tammy Stahl, and Barry Sievers. These 5 people, all part of Breakthrough T1D's ride team, recently passed away in a tragic car accident. Please keep Jeff, Michelle, Josh, Tammy, and Barry in your thoughts and prayers, and think of their families and loved ones. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. This is a content warning. This episode of the podcast deals with life and death. As I know that many of you listen with your children, I just wanted to let you know that you might want to skip this episode with your kids.
I'm Michelle Alsweger. I've been involved in the world of diabetes since my son Jesse was diagnosed at the age of 3 on March 3rd of 2000. I became a director of JDRS in those early years. I helped begin some ski snowboard camps called Riding on Insulin, which my son participated in. And I kind of stepped away from diabetes for a few years. My son was kind of sick of talking about diabetes. So I took a job at a women's magazine and just kind of volunteered my time in the world of diabetes. And then on February 3rd, 2010, my 13-year-old son, Jesse, passed away from his type 1 diabetes. And I became an advocate more so for people who also have lost their children to type 1 diabetes throughout, actually all over the world. I mentor about 100 families through a private Facebook group, getting them connected to each other so that they have the support that they need.
That's really amazing. Oh, okay. So how old was Jesse when he was diagnosed?
So Jesse was 3 years old when he was diagnosed.
What was the presentation? Was it average, normal?
It was every typical, everything. He was the little skinny 3-year-old boy, all of a sudden started wetting the bed again. And I was kind of flustered about it because we had a water container in our refrigerator and I caught him getting up in the middle of the night, getting himself water. I thought he was just fascinated with the fact that there was a spigot that he could mess around with, but it turns out he was just really super thirsty.
Right.
And it was a Friday afternoon and I was ignoring the warning signs. I didn't want it to be diabetes. I grew up with 5 aunts and uncles with type 1 diabetes. My grandma raised 5. And back in the day when insulin, came in a glass syringe, and it was even before urine test strips, I was around people who used test tubes to check their urine.
Right.
For all of that. So we, the typical signs, took him to the emergency room. It was 1 finger poke. Simply, I was very fortunate that there was no misdiagnosis, and they just simply said he has diabetes.
And so you had a fair feeling from your past, your history, and your family that that's what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely wanted to be in denial. But you know what? There was also that point where, I'm driving to the hospital and I'm, saying out loud to whomever, the universe, please don't let it be diabetes. And then at the time I was thinking, well, wait a minute. I hope it is diabetes. Don't let it be something like leukemia that could possibly take his life, right? Never occurred to me that it could possibly take his life.
Okay, so 3 years old, gosh, that's a while ago now. Injections, like just there's no glucose monitors or stuff like that, right, at that moment?
No, there were meters in 2000. So he had meters. He actually, at the age of 5, went on an insulin pump.
Okay.
He was one of the first kids in our area to go on it because I fought with the endocrinologist to make that happen. And actually, if you flash forward to 2010, he actually did have a continuous glucose monitor. He actually didn't wear it very often. It was at a time where they were still a little bit fickle.
Right.
And he just said he didn't want to feel like the front of an airplane, dashboard.
Mm-hmm.
He felt like there were too many devices hanging off of him at the time.
So was he wearing it at the time of his passing?
No, he was wearing his pump.
He was wearing a pump. Okay. So I think we should just dive right in, because like I told you before we started recording, I always think to talk to you because it always becomes my concern that, inevitably someone passes away, and I don't want to say how frequently it happens because I don't know. It feels like at least once a year you hear about someone that's lost their life who's had type 1 diabetes and living with it. And then it's always my fear that when people see that, they become more cautious about their own care, but maybe in the wrong way. Maybe in the way where they're like, oh, I'd be happier to accept the high blood sugar because...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe they kind of incorrectly think that the way somebody's passed is just because their blood sugar's gotten very low. So...
Yeah, your podcast is timely because this has been a topic that there's many of us that have been talking about this topic, the high blood sugars, right?
Yeah.
Derek Rapp, who is the JDRS CEO, he and I have been conversing about that exact topic, and I've been talking with Beyond Type 1 about that topic because I think it's phenomenal right now. I'll back up just a little bit. When Jesse died back in 2010, nobody was really talking about death due to type 1 diabetes, right? We were all kind of scared. We didn't want to talk about it. And let's face it, endocrinologists didn't really tell us that diabetes was something you could die from.
Right.
So, it was something we said, just take good care of yourself. You'll live a long, happy life, right? So when he died, because I had international attention from a documentary I had done, people knew me. And so they thought, oh my gosh, if this can happen to this mom, it can happen to any of us. And so it puts everyone in panic. And so I think every time you hear of a death, and you said once a year, I hear from someone at least once a week that has lost a child to type 1, at least once a week. Some become more public than others because some people just, when they pass away, their way of dealing with it is to kind of go inside. They're not going to be proactive, and that's how they're going to grieve.
Right.
So what's happened is everyone talks about dead in bed, right? Which is, I'm so afraid my child is going to have a low and he's not going to wake up in the morning, which is rightfully so. I get it. And, it's a fear to have. That's why CGMs are so amazing and alert dogs. But what people don't think about, and they're not talking about, is the high blood sugars. The one thing I've learned through all of this is I call it the dangerous cocktail. The dangerous cocktail, everyone's got their eye on those low blood sugars in the middle of the night. They're waking up in the night. But I don't see parents panicking as much when their kids are at a 500 or their meters are just reading HI. They're not testing for ketones. I know a lot of families don't even own keto strips. I know a lot of adults with type 1 that I work with in our endurance community don't carry keto strips, which they don't realize. The dangerous cocktail is this. This is what I've learned from the deaths, is if you have a high A1C and then you tack on and you add that you have a high blood sugar right now and you have large ketones, that is a recipe for disaster. So, like, for instance, if you have a teenager who's currently an A1C of 12%, their bodies, and I'm no medical expert, right? This is my opinion and what I've seen,
of course,
is if their blood sugars are high and they have a high A1C and those large ketones and they are in DKA, and as moms and dads, we're not as afraid of those high blood sugars. And we also have a fear of taking our kids to the ER because we've learned over the years that we feel like we know more than the residents that are there, right? I mean, I bet you there's 100 people that will listen to this podcast and have a memory of taking their kid to an ER and the resident starts to load up insulin drip instead of a glucose drip, right? And you're like, whoa, what are you doing, right? So we have this doctor mom and doctor dad syndrome where we think we can take better care of them at home than at the hospital. And then by the time they get to the hospital, it's too late.
Yeah, and
that makes
it makes a ton of sense. And I think it feeds right into everything that you've said so far, plus everything that I see usually. Hold on, I have to tell Arden to drink a half of a juice. I'm just texting her, and then we're good. Okay. And so, so I think that what you see here is that, first of all, like you said, when you start off, I remember getting, somebody handed me glucagon, and I was like, what's this? And they're like, oh, it's in case they get really low. It's dangerous. You'll never use it. Don't worry about it. And so then that's the overall feeling, like, oh, she has type 1 diabetes. It's horrible. It's going to be with her forever. But even the emergency thing, I don't even have to understand that well, because it's never going to happen. And then, as you're acclimating yourself to trying to figure out how the insulin works, the message from medical a lot is better high than low. And then you're sort of the human part of you takes over, right? Well, they said 150 to 200 was okay, but it's only 210. So that's fine. Right. And then your body, you start to accept it. Well, 250, I mean, that sucks, but it's not terrible. I can get it down. And before you know it, 180, 200 is your norm. You live there. And then when you see a 320, suddenly it doesn't seem that horrible anymore, even though your blood sugar is now at 320, 3 times what it should be. And there's not that panic. You do see it all the time. Like people say, well, I want to get their blood sugar high overnight so I can sleep. I don't even understand that. Yeah. I'm up as much when my daughter's blood sugar is high as when it's low. Maybe more, honestly, when it's high, because it's more difficult to deal with. It takes longer to adjust and fix.
And a lot of parents aren't actually informed either, though, that, when their kids, a child can have 150 blood sugar, which, fine, it's in a range. But if they're sporting any kind of ketones, and they're not getting it, like you can be 150 and say, oh, if I just don't dose insulin, they'll be fine. Their body constantly needs that insulin. You constantly need to be feeding that system. So you can be in danger at 150 if you have large ketones.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're not, yeah.
It's my daughter's sick right now. It's just why she's home from school. She has a head cold. She doesn't have a fever. She doesn't have the flu. She just has a head cold. And for the last 2 days, her blood sugar has been difficult. It sticks at 200. I have to give her enough insulin to knock a horse over to get it to move down. Overnight at 3 o'clock, she's growing on top of it. So overnight, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, the night before, it tried so hard to go up. And I felt like I was putting insulin in with a funnel instead of with a cannula, and then last night, I just didn't wake up. The thing beeped and beeped and beeped, and at 6 a.m. I opened my eyes. The first thing I heard was it beeping, and I thought, and I looked at the graph, and sure enough, at 3 o'clock, she went from 120 straight up. And I went in, I tested her. She was 310. She had been 310 for 3 hours, for the most part.
Yeah.
I bolused so much insulin. I mean, just 2 and 3 times what moving her 200 points should take. And I still had to bolus again and again. And by the time she was down to 80, it took me, I'm going to say, the better part of 4 hours. And I gave her, so much more insulin than I would have in a normal situation, because very likely, and I didn't test her, but very likely she had ketones. Plus, it's more difficult to affect the high blood sugar. Once your blood sugar's high, it takes more insulin normally, those sorts of things. And then I think that's how people get caught in a loop. They see a 250 and they go, oh, well, it should be this much insulin. And then they end up using half as much as it takes. And then 2 hours later, they go, oh my God, it's still 220. And they try it again and again. And before you know it, it's time to eat. And then you get caught in this horrible cycle. It is very hard on your body. And so, and it's not going to kill you this second, but it doesn't mean it doesn't have a hard effect on you. And I think that's hard for people to hear, that they or a child has a disease that has 2 sides of a spectrum, and both sides of it are equally dangerous. Just the timing of them is dangerous. Like, do you want to have something horrible happen to you right now? Do you want to have something horrible happen to you 10 years from now? Do you want to have something horrible happen to you 3 months from now? What I think what happens is that becomes so overwhelming for some people that they just panic and pick a side, and they give up in some way. And I'm always trying to tell people that it's not, as crazy as it sounds, if you're struggling with it, it is much simpler to keep a blood sugar more around 100 than it is to keep it higher. And then it just takes practice and a little bit of knowledge. And a lot of times that is knowledge you don't get at the doctor, which is why community ends up being so important sometimes. But that's why I asked you on. I just wanted people to hear from somebody who had lived through it and was still talking about it, that, that. So, I mean, I guess, can we go backwards a little bit? And I don't know how much of this you talk about, but do you know the steps that happened that that led to
Yeah,
Jesse's demise?
So it's interesting. So I'll give you my perspective on this. So ever since that happened, and every time there's a death in the DOC, Diabetes Online Community, there's different sides that happen. There's times where I feel it's really awesome. Like, I'm so happy people talk about this now, because even if we save one life, it's like one parent decides to get up an extra time in the night, or one parent knows the warning signs. Like, as long as we're talking about it, I think it's really good. Then there's this other side where I like to protect the parent from seeing things. So let me give you an example, Scott, and I'll go back to your actual question. So there was a recent death. The young lady's name was Alex, and it blew up all over Facebook, and it's so well-intentioned, and the people who are posting it mean well, right?
Yes.
But what I saw and made me sad, and a lot of the parents in the community that nobody wants to belong to, right? This lost community, we respect the parents' privacy. So what happens is someone posts that photo. Like, I would rather see it say there was another loss in the community, prayers, sadness, all of that. That's fine. But what happens is the threads blow up, and what you see is, well, what happened? What was the parent doing? And then you see hateful things, like, clearly the mom didn't know what she was doing, or how did that girl not know for 48 hours she was in DKA? That could have been prevented.
Right.
What I see in that is there is a mom out there who's suffering. She's going to suffer for the rest of her life. She lost a child, and these people are gossiping. It just comes off as gossip, because those parents, as much as they want to know what happened, Scott, you already know the answer. We know people die from extreme highs and extreme lows. And all you have to do is keep doing what you're doing, getting up in the night, checking. What happened to Jesse is what I will tell you everybody is, I don't go through the steps of what happened that day, because when I'm asked to do that, you're actually asking me to relive my worst nightmare, right? So there's I call it the slideshow in my head. So I have to shut off the slideshow, because I can't relive that memory. So what I do is I tell you simply this: you're already doing what you should be doing. It's highs and lows. The coroner actually told us he's baffled, and he labeled it as DKA. And I can second guess it. I could read the coroner's report. Nothing is going to bring him back, and nothing is going to save, Aiden or anybody, right? And you just have to keep trudging. And another thing I tell people a lot is, you can spend so much time focused on the diabetes and asking me questions about exactly what happened, and you miss that your child, gets hit by a bus walking across the street, or riding his bike, or riding an ATV, or, he gets cancer. So that's kind of how I always handle that question is, there's no pinpoint, there's nothing that's going to save your child by learning exactly what happened. I mean, in all the families that I've encountered, the 100 families that have found me and found our private Facebook page where they can grieve and scream or share good details or happy days, is the college age kids. There is something there to be said that when you're sending your kids off to college, the biggest thing I see is death due to DKA. They go out drinking with their buddies, or they simply just don't tell their roommates they even have diabetes, or how to give them a glucagon, or how to, if I'm acting weird, give me a Juicebox. These are the steps you need to take. What happens is, maybe they went out drinking and they're acting a little weird, and people just put them to bed thinking that they're just drunk, right? And then they don't wake up. There is a very, very big preventive measure you can take in that situation.
Well, I would say that, and I asked you that question hoping you would answer it the way you did, and more just to kind of spur on this part of the conversation, I guess. So when you see people in the community or online or wherever it ends up being, and they start wanting to mine out the information, how did this happen? What are the steps? I always think they just want to know what happened, because they are just hoping that the story is opposite of what they do. You know what I mean? Like they just want to hear that someone did something wrong, or someone did something, in their eyes that's not correct or different than they do, so that they can sit back comfortably and say, oh, okay, good. I'm not doing it the way they did it, so my kid's going to be okay. And it's just to me, it's, I don't even know how to put it really. It's just a wild, like, flailing into the world. Like, just please let this not be my story. And I need to hear your story. So I find out it's not mine. And in the end, that they don't see how horrible it comes off is fascinating. And I'm not saying you don't have those thoughts. I mean, you spoke about the little girl, or the girl who passed recently. And I try very hard not to pay attention to just any of that. I don't think it's any of my business. I don't pay attention. And I heard one person say that, the kid had, it was in DK for, days. And it did pop into my head, like, God, didn't they test? Didn't they know? But at the same time, then my next thought is very simply this, and I mean this completely honestly. It's a really terrible disease to live with. The factors that affect you come from so many different directions and so fast, and everyone's understanding of it is different. To blame anyone for anything that happens with type 1 diabetes and the use of man-made insulin and not having a pancreas that works is just flatly it's not human. You can't blame somebody for that. It's no different than blaming somebody for, being in a car accident or, falling off of a bridge or I don't know what the hell, anything, you know what I mean? Like there's some things in the world that just happen to you. You can't be blamed for them. And it's wrong to try, I think. So.
Well, and the reality is this, there is not a parent out there who's lost a child isn't already dealing with blame on their own, right? So there's so much coulda, woulda, shoulda, no matter how it happened, where it happened, when it happened. If I spent all my time blaming myself or my ex-husband, I wouldn't live day to day. And like people don't understand sometimes that for the first few years, and sometimes, I mean, I have people that I've been part of this group for 7 years. We've kind of gone through this together. They never kind of escape the constant pain and suffering of it. They just, that's where their grief took them. It's interesting because we're talking about this because someone shared an article with me today about grief and loss of a child, and like 7 things I've learned from loss of my child. It's so well written, and and like step number 7 just really resonated with me is that because of the deepest pain that we have felt, we really experience joy more than the average person. And I don't know if you can completely understand that, but like because we know the bottom of bottom, like when we see joy, it's such a strong emotion. And the same with grief, like any kind of loss we feel now, like say someone goes through a breakup. I call it, how do I explain it? It's like you already have a sunburn and then the sun's shining and burning it worse, right? So everything you feel painful is twice as painful. And everything like joy really stands out. And I say that because like some people can see me on the diabetes online community. I write a lot for Beyond Type 1. I've written for D-Life, and I share my joy a lot. And I am living a great life. Tomorrow I leave for Breckenridge, Colorado, and I get to ski with, 25 Type 1 ski coaches and help train them and then run a camp on Saturday up there for kids with Type 1 diabetes. I'm living a really good life. And I've decided when I say things like, people ask me, how are you? And I can say, I've never been happier. It used to really pain me to say that because I would always think, what is that person thinking in the back of their mind? By God, she lost her child. How can she say she's happy? Well, because I have to move forward. I have to continue living. I can't live in doom and gloom every minute. But don't for 1 second think that a parent who's lost a child isn't feeling this underlying constant hole in their life. They're just learning to live with, just like much like you learned to live with, your child's diagnosis, right?
Well, I was going to say, I was totally going to say, yeah. I was just totally going to say, I'm prefacing it needlessly because I don't feel like you need me to, but it obviously doesn't compare. But at the same time, I know what you mean about the joy thing. Like I always tell people, like now that my daughter lives with this chronic illness that does envelop a lot of our time, it does loom over top of your head. Is she okay now? Will she be okay later? How is this going to affect all these things? That when something good happens, you really do feel it very purely. And at the same time, when something that you used to think of as being bad happens, you can laugh it off almost sometimes. Like sometimes I'm just like, exactly. That's not important. Is that person upset about that? Like they totally should get up with me tonight at 2:30 and watch Arden try to eat a banana in her sleep. Like I think that would definitely change their mind about what bad means. But at the same time, I heard what you were saying. I guess that when you see something bad, that it brings all of your emotions to the top more, because I can't imagine how strong you are to be able to get to the point where you can say, this is the happiest I've ever been, because being someone who has not nearly gone through what you've gone through, I'm having a hard time imagining being able to get past the idea that I'm allowed to be happy after, and that I should be, or that I'm not hurting something, and that you figured that out, that path. That's magnificent. I'm so glad you're sharing it with other people, because it's not something anyone can imagine, obviously, unless it's happening.
Well, the only way you get there is with support.
If you take insulin or sulfonylureas, you are at risk for your blood sugar going too low. You need a safety net when it matters most. Be ready with Gvoke HypoPen. My daughter carries Gvoke HypoPen everywhere she goes because it's a ready-to-use rescue pen for treating very low blood sugar in people with diabetes ages 2 and above that I trust. Low blood sugar emergencies can happen unexpectedly, and they demand quick action. Luckily, Gvoke HypoPen can be administered in 2 simple steps, even by yourself in certain situations. Show those around you where you store Gvoke HypoPen and how to use it. They need to know how to use Gvoke HypoPen before an emergency situation happens. Learn more about why Gvoke HypoPen is in Arden's Diabetes Toolkit at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used if you have a tumor in the gland on the top of your kidneys called a pheochromocytoma, or if you have a tumor in your pancreas called an insulinoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk for safety information.
And, I was just very fortunate that the people I chose to surround myself with, I have to tell you, like, there's this very weird thing that happens at loss. I have written about it, but when I lost my son, I was very involved in the diabetes world. I'd done a documentary. I had, given to, done every JDRF ride every year, all over the country. And all of a sudden I'm like, who's going to want to be around the person who lost their kid to diabetes? If your kid, if you as the parent who have a healthy type 1 living at home, you're going to want to spend any time with the mom who lost a child, I really panicked I was going to lose this entire community. And I was very blessed and fortunate that my people rallied around me. And, and it's, I talk about, I'm very blunt. I talk about, the loss of Jesse and moving forward and what I continue to do for the community. But I guess I just feel very lucky that I was, allowed to stay here. Of course, I use my time wisely in that, when I'm at a riding on insulin ski snowboard camp and I'm standing talking to a 10-year-old kid, and he says, how old was your son when he was diagnosed? I just say 3. And he asks questions. I would never talk to, those kids,
sure,
and tell them I lost my son, because it's not an appropriate.
He was about your age when he passed. Yeah. There's no value in that.
No value.
Yeah, exactly. But it is really cool that people did that, because I tried to imagine, do people struggle with how to speak to you when they know? I imagine they would, right?
Sure. The worst is when someone doesn't know. Now it's been 7 years, so it hasn't been as bad, because most of the people I know. But, in the early first couple of years, it's just so horrible is, you run into an old neighbor and they're like, gosh, how's Jesse? And you're like, well,
Yeah, where do you even start?
And what's hard for those families, and myself included, is it forces you, they're grieving for the first time and you're forced to re-grieve something you've gotten, you're at step 29 and they're at step 1. So you see their pain and you see their grief, right? So, I don't even reach out. Like if a family is lost, I don't reach out to them. I kind of wait for them to find me. Let them come to me when they're ready. And some are never ready. Some just decide, it's just not their thing. To grieve with others. They just don't find a need for it. But it's a solid group that helps each other. And I'm really proud that a lot have gotten involved. And I don't know if you know, but like Beyond Type 1 is really involved in the whole DKA movement to get information to every pediatrician in the U.S.
Yeah.
Warning signs. And while that's not going to save a Jesse, it is going to save kids and it's going to save lives. And I'm just so proud of the people at Beyond Type 1 that they took a sensitive topic that I know that they've been contacted by others in the online community who are saying you're scaring people with this topic. And, I think that their opinion, and I can't really speak for them, but just from conversations I've had with them, is they're like me. They don't care. If it saves one kid, it's worth talking about.
Yeah, I interviewed Mary recently, and we were talking about all these different ideas, and I can't agree with that more. And at the same time, like, you're scaring people. The idea that you're scaring people by bringing that up, that starts to scramble my head, because here's what I'm scared by. I'm scared by all the people I see online who say things like, hey, my kid's blood sugar's been 300 for 3 hours. Should I correct again? Or do you think it needs more insulin? Like, and I'm not scared because they don't know. I'm scared because someone hasn't explained it to them, because their doctor didn't tell them, because they got some sort of information that led them to that thought. And you can shine a light on things like DKA, awareness, and try to pretend that that's scary, but that's not the scary thing that's going on in your community. What's going on in your community, I think, simply put, is that most people don't understand fundamentally how insulin works and how to use it. I really think that's the most scary thing, because at some point then, and I know most scary is not English, I'm pretty sure, but most very scariest is what I'm saying, is that none of us really get taught how to use insulin and how it works. And then
I have a really interesting story, like, just to share quickly on that, is so one of our elite coaches, and I'll use her name because she won't care, Lauren. Lauren and I have gotten very close over the last few years, because she also did the Ironman Wisconsin with our group this last year and doing it again. So we've gotten to be friends, and she stayed at my home, and she was over in Austria. She lives over there quite a bit of the year because she trains with the ski team over there. And I follow her on her Dexcom share. There's a few people that I follow just because they look at me as someone that's kind of an outsider, not a parent. I'm not going to chastise them, but I'm kind of a safety net for Lauren when she travels.
That's cool.
And so she's 7 hours ahead of me, and she is having roller coaster blood sugars. And I'm talking up to high, down to low, up to high, down to low. And I mean HI and LOW. Mm-hmm. And so we're in constant contact, and she's just staying in a place with a 20-year-old kid who has no understanding of type 1 diabetes. She ends up having to administer her own glucagon. So I just kept her on the phone for a couple hours, and we just hung out while I worked, and I kept her safe. And just watching her graph and trying to help her, I just finally said, you know what, Lauren, I know you're not going to want to hear this. You're scaring me. Your numbers are scaring me. The fact that you have large ketones is scaring me. You need to be in a hospital. And she said, but I'm in Austria. I'm afraid of the language barrier. I'm afraid they're not going to know what to do. And I said, you need to be where the right equipment is and get the help. And I think if Lauren didn't know me and didn't know Jesse's story, I don't know that she would have gone to the hospital. But she went, and she was very grateful. She said, thank you for pushing me. I was severely dehydrated, and I was definitely in DKA. Now, had she kept going at home, I don't know what would have happened to Lauren. And so when I hear that, that lets me sleep at night, that I helped Lauren, that I know that Lauren went to a hospital simply because she knew Jesse's story. And I'm sure there's other parents all over the world that I don't even know who knows Jesse's story and probably had a similar situation.
And you and I have never spoken before this, and we don't know each other, and yet you come into my mind frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and it's always wrapped around this issue. And I don't want to, it's funny. We always talk about this community online, and I wonder if people realize when they're in it, I'm kind of going backwards, but when they're in it, that they're likely not going to be in it forever. And so as a person who has had a blog for 10 years, and I'm sure that you have a similar idea, the names and the avatars, they come and they go and they come and they go. And people get in there and they either get the information they need, or they stay till they're comfortable, or whatever it ends up being. But in the moment that they're there, they believe that this is the world, that it's always been like this and it'll always be like this. And they've just added themselves to it. And what I know as an outsider looking from, back a little bit, that in 6 months, they'll stop coming around. They'll understand insulin. They'll not be scared anymore. They'll get the answers they need, the comfort they need, whatever it ends up being, and they'll go back to living their lives. I always feel good when I see people disappear. When I see them leave, I always imagine that they just have everything they need and they just wanted to go back to their life. And at the same time, when you see somebody who is just so fervently just arguing or trying to make points, or what did this person do? Like that whole thing, I think they're missing the point of it. That there's this comfort there. There are some people who have been there for so long, they could come really help, like you did with Lauren. And I just wonder if sometimes it's not lost on them that they're not the driving force of what's happening, that the entity is the driving force of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, or even why I got off on that tangent, to be perfectly honest with you. But it always strikes me when someone's ranting and raving or coming out like they're just like, I know what to do. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like you've been here for 3 weeks, but go ahead, tell everyone what to do. And, and then they get going. And then I always look at the threads and I think, oh my gosh, this person asked a simple question. There is a simple answer to it. You can agree or disagree that I know what that answer is. And then 6 people come in and say 6 different things. And I always try to picture the person like that and going, I asked a question, 6 people answered 6 different ways. I don't know what to do now. Like, who do I randomly pick? Do I just take the person whose avatar looks the most pleasing to me and decide to believe them? Like, how does it end up working? But to know that there's someone like you who you can trust what's coming from them is huge. And I think that those auras are the community, even though the people who are maybe the loudest in it or the most active, maybe they may never know that, but so it's a really huge thing you're doing. And I think I'm thanking you in a very long, convoluted way.
Thanks. Well, the DOC, the whole online community, it's such a resource. And in the same breath, when I meet a newly diagnosed family, I say, just be so careful on the DOC, because there are the shamers being the ones that say, oh, my child's never been above 170. I'm calling BS on that. Sure. Okay. Because we've all been there, and, you're not magic. You're not a unicorn. There's the shamers, and then there's people that know everything, or, I think some of the DOC has gotten a little bit, dare I say, out of control. Again, I'm probably going to get my throat cut for that. But there are some, I've been blocked from a major one that I never have once made a comment on. Never once.
They just decided you were out, huh?
I got shunned based on somebody else I knew. And I'm like, why did I get shunned from that? But turns out I don't really care. But you know what I mean? It's a drama filled, DOC situation. And I don't need to be there, but I warn people. It's like, just be careful of the information you're seeking and where you're seeking it.
Listen, I'll be completely honest. If you asked me, my honest answer would be, there's good information, there's bad information, and there are crazy people. You have to figure out what those 3 things are.
Yep.
Yeah. And so
absolutely,
it just, I maybe can stay out of it a little more. I know this is going to sound completely backwards, like I'm in 1982, or that I, voted for Donald Trump or something. But I think because I'm a guy, I don't get it as hard. I think there's something to that. I think that I'm not one of the moms that it doesn't hit me as hard, but I still get it. For this will sound like humble bragging, but for every 10 emails that are like, hey, I listened to your podcast and my kid's A1C is down 2 points. Thank you very much. I didn't understand how to do this, or I never thought about this before. Every once in a while you hear from somebody who's like, you're a pompous jerk and you think you know everything. And I'm like, I don't think I know anything. I'm trying to tell you what works for me. Do whatever you want with that. And so, and at the same time, I've had someone yell and rant and rave at me because I let my daughter eat whatever she wants to within a certain degree and re-deal with it with insulin. So I get hammered for that. And I just have taken a very interesting tactic where I don't care. And so I just really, I pay no mind to it. And I do sometimes thank the fact that a number of years ago, I wrote a parenting book and I got these reviews, and the reviews were mostly very glowing. And then some of them were not. And then I just realized, I was like, someone read this book and loved it, and someone read this book and hated it. I'm not in control of that. I can't possibly be in control of that. And I think of this the same way. My information's not dangerous. I always preface what I'm going to say. We'll say it right now. Nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making changes to your medical plan. There. I'm not telling you what to do. And so you do whatever you want. And at the same time, please don't yell at me because I don't like that. But I am just going to delete it if you yell at me. So.
Well, you make an interesting point. And like I said, Beyond Type 1 has given me a really good voice. And like I said, I appreciate them. And I did an article about etiquette when you hear in the DOC that someone has passed away. Mm-hmm. How do you handle yourself? And like one of the biggest things I say is don't make this about you. And, don't reach out to that parent because I understand the empathy. I understand, oh my gosh, I too have a child with type 1 diabetes. You're living my worst nightmare. Right. Yeah, we know we're living your worst nightmare. You telling me that you still have a child that is breathing isn't helping me. You're helping yourself. You're making yourself feel better. You're not making me feel any better. So I just say, stop yourself. Don't post on their, funeral page. Don't, gosh, my child has diabetes,
I can commiserate with this, because you can't.
Yeah, you can't.
Draw a strong line to your point with this. Almost every wedding toast or someone who stands up at a funeral, these people try to speak about the departed, or they try to speak about the people getting married. But if you really listen to what they're saying, they're telling stories about themselves. Even when people don't mean to do it, it's hard for them not to relate things back to themselves. It really is a very human trait. I can't say who, but I remember sitting at a wedding listening, and I was like, is this person ever going to mention the bride and groom? Or no, I don't think they're going to. No. This is all about them. They thought they were talking about the bride and groom. It was fascinating.
Yeah, I really do believe the majority of people, they absolutely mean well.
Oh, sure.
And I know that. And, I always tell people too, it's like, if you don't know what to say, just say, I don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. If that's okay. That's saying something.
Don't say anything.
Yeah, or don't say anything. It's okay. But it's amazing to me, like in an article about etiquette and explaining, don't ask the person what happened. If they want to share, they're going to share. I say that in my article. And I will kid you not, in the thread that follows on Beyond Type 1, I was completely attacked by people saying, she's not telling us what's happened. We have a right to know. We have a right. She's hiding something. I'm like, by God, you did not read my article. Because my article says, don't ask me. I'm telling you not to ask me. And you're telling me I have to tell you. No, I don't. I don't have to tell you. And you know what? There are people who have asked me, and I, of course, tell them, detailed information. And it's a right moment or a wrong moment. And I get to choose when that is. Or who it is, or, it's like simple things, tangent wise. It's like, you're shopping at Target and someone asked me, because they're looking at the groceries I have on the cart or whatever, like, oh, how many kids do you have? I don't get into details because I'm not going to forge a friendship with the cashier, right? So I'll say 4 kids.
Right.
I have 4 kids. I don't need to elaborate. Now, if it's someone I value in my life, I'm going to say, I have 4 children. Unfortunately, my son, Jesse, actually passed away when he was 13 because I know I'm going to have a relationship with that person and it's worth me telling and going through pain and actually putting that person through pain, right? Because the Target cashier really probably doesn't want to know that.
And right? Wasn't trying to make you feel badly. And now they think they did and they probably didn't. Yeah. And so here's what we've learned, I think. Michelle, shut up it's the right thing to do. It's everyone shut up. You don't have any thoughts. You haven't perfectly crafted your comment to be the exact right comment. You don't have a story that's so close to someone else's that they're going to be happy to hear it. That this person is going through such a multifaceted thing on an emotional level that you'll never understand. Just don't. There's nothing you can do. Make a donation to a diabetes charity in the kid's name, but then don't go out in the world and tell anybody. Do it for yourself. Don't do it for someone else or so that someone else knows what a great person you are or so that you can feel better about it or feel comfortable. It's not about you. Somebody had a horrible tragedy. Leave them alone. Am I close? Is that close or have I gone too far, Michelle? Have you hung up? You're like, you know what? That was too hard line for me. Yeah.
Like I said, this book by, I believe her name is Amanda Miller. I literally just shared it. It was so poignant and just explaining like what we're feeling, how we're feeling it. And the best thing you can do is just be supportive. You can be supportive and loving without understanding, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
It's like, I don't want you to ever go into your brain and try to imagine what it feels like not to have your child. No one should feel that pain. I don't wish that upon my worst enemy because I know what it feels like. I want everyone to stay in their bubble, their happy bubble, really, honestly, for as long as they humanly can, because it's a really nice place. You don't really realize how nice it is until you're on the other side of it.
Right. And it's not just with the death of a loved one or a child, by the way, too. You will eventually get out of that bubble. Like I remember being a young person in my 20s who was just married. I was like, this is all perfect until the first time that like my hot water heater broke. And I was like, life's not as perfect as I thought it was. And then I fought with my wife one time. I was like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? And then, your bubble continues to degrade. It breaks down over time until, and I hate to sound like, but till the actuality of the real world hits you from all sides. Like you can only insulate yourself for so long. Hold on to this part of it for absolutely as long as you can. Like don't let this part go. You can assume that the election might have been rigged by Russians. You can think that your neighbor probably is a bad guy who is dumping bleach in your bush because he doesn't like the way it's blocking his driveway. All that stuff is probably happening, and it's okay to know that. But try to stay blissfully ignorant about this, right? Just it's always going to be great. Everything's going to be great. I love my kids. I love my life. I love everything, and this is always going to be like this because one day when it's not,
you never know when the bus is going to hit you.
Right.
You don't know. And that's always my advice to people. I say, please just go let your type 1 live their life because you don't know when anybody's bus is going to hit. So just go live. That's the best advice I can give to anybody. And that's why I keep doing what I do at Riding on Insulin and watching all these kids and the adults. I mean, I have, 100 endurance athletes all over the US and Canada that race, with type 1 diabetes. And like, I see them living life and mentoring and speaking and, telling people to live their best life. I mean, that's how to live it.
Yeah. But do you remember the egg crack challenge?
Yeah.
Okay. So the boy that was for, who I can't believe, but his name it's slipping my mind at the moment. I interviewed his
parent, Lindo.
Oh yes. Thank you. I interviewed Mrs. Hover, a year ago. And in the course of that conversation, the one thing that stuck with me, it sticks with me every day, I might think about her constantly, is that she said that no matter what the outcome with her son was, even though he passed away, she would not have changed anything about how he lived his life. And she just talked about how happy he was and how great he was, doing at college. And he was the captain of his lacrosse team at school. And that he was a happy, fulfilled person. And that she thought, if she restricted that because of diabetes and he got an extra day, she just didn't think that those days would have been valuable as him just living his life. And man, I really do think about that all the time because it is easy. It is very easy to wax poetic about this. Like, live your life. The bus might hit you, like all that stuff. And I believe it. But to really do it, that's top level brass balls. Like she believes that now, today, as much as she did then, and I give her a ton of credit, and I think you fall right in that same category. So I just think it's just a wonderful message for people. You really do just need to live for today and be happy, not worry about what's going to happen tomorrow. You kind of can't,
Yeah, she's a friend of mine, and she is part of our group. She found us. She's an amazing lady. So she still has a big, loud voice out there. So
just to stick to your guns after that, to not one time go, you know what? Okay. Maybe I would have changed. Like, to not do that is such a respectful position for her son. You know what I mean? Like, and for her family and her life and their decisions and all those other things. I'm always, there's a couple of people I think about a lot when I look at my daughter, because it is not a stretch to be going along, living your life just as easy as could be, getting great blood sugars for weeks on end. Hey, my A1C is 5.8. I'm kicking this right in the butt. I should start taking care of other people's kids. I'm so good at this, blah, blah, blah. Like, really starting to feel it, and you could be going along as well as that. And still sometimes I walk into my daughter's room at night to, look at her CGM, test her blood sugar, turn off the fan, whatever it is I'm going to do. And every once in a while I do look at her and I think, my God, is she going to make it the whole way? Like, maybe not, right? But I never think that of my son. but he stands on a baseball field with someone throwing a ball 100 miles an hour. And I never think, I wonder if that ball hit him in the head and kill him. Like, I never think that, you know, and in the end,
exactly,
both are fairly likely, you know. So isn't it weird how being attached to the disease then suddenly makes you feel like, oh, this is something I need to be focused on more. Michelle, let me tell you a secret. I don't drive the speed limit, you know, and it's funny. And it's funny. I never think I'm about to slaughter my whole family. It never occurs to me, you know, right. Never once. And so you can get yourself in the right mindset. And I think you proved earlier by what you were talking about that there is no mindset that you can't become happy with if you work at it hard enough and have the right support, honestly. I get
asked all the time, you know, why do I choose to continue in diabetes? Like, how do I do that? How do I put myself around the disease every day? Mm-hmm. And I, you know, that's my way of grieving. That's healing and coping. Like, first it was coping and then it became healing to be around others, that I get to still accept that as part of my life. And I don't know any different. Like, I want to help other kids. I want to make sure another family doesn't go through what I go through. And the piece that, and people who've heard me speak have seen this, because I use it as a PowerPoint slide, is about 3 weeks after Jesse died, I was feeling very, very sorry for myself and sitting at my dining room table crying, like, what am I going to do with my life? And, you know, this is horrifying, and, you know, every thought you can think of. And I got my mail, and one of his teachers sent me his last writing assignment. And she's like, and it was a very kind of like, oh, by the way, I thought you might want this. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you have no idea what this piece of paper means to me. And it was his last essay that he had to type or write up. It's handwritten, actually. And he could write about any topic he wanted. And the topic was, my mom is courageous. And the entire thing, just in detail, this is a kid who says, Mom, stop talking about diabetes. He would say it all the time. But in writing, he put, I'm so proud of my mom. She does the JDRF bike ride every year. And if that wasn't enough, she became a director of JDRF. And if that wasn't enough, she decided to do an Ironman for me. And I got to cross the finish line with her. And she did a documentary. And he just keeps going. And he said, I just am so proud that my mom has always put me and my diabetes first. So for me, it was just like, well, there you go. Jesse has told me what I'm going to do with my life. And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, it meant so much to him that you were on his side like that. And now you're just on everybody's side. I was going to make a comparison, and now it just seems small, so I'm not going to. But I'm just going to let it go. But I think that a lot of people who stay in the community and work really hard like this, I think they feel very similarly. I think that it's just... You said it before, like, this is what you know, how do you stop doing it, right? How do you, I some days feel like, sometimes you see online someone who's struggling with something, then you're like, wow, it's such a simple fix. I wish I wasn't running out the door right now. I would just send them a message and say, you know, if you call me right now in 15 minutes, I can explain this to you. You know, like, I don't want you to struggle like this anymore. Like, I don't want your kid to feel like that. I don't want to live knowing that somewhere you are broken down in your house because you can't figure out this simple thing that I know the answer to. And at the same time, I can't spend my entire life talking to people about things like this, but you found a way to dedicate a ton of your life to it. I'm trying to do it with a podcast. You're doing it with your work, and there are a lot of people doing it in a lot of different ways. And I think that's the core of what the community is. And it's obviously driven by stories like yours with Jesse's letter and just tons of other people who have had impactful moments in their lives that have drawn them to want to help somebody else. You're everything you said is beautiful here. Thank you. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on.
No. This is enough. This was you have to thank me now. Stop it. So let me. We have to do something pleasant and upbeat for a second. Hold on. Would you share your favorite happy memory of Jesse with me?
Oh my gosh. Favorite happy memory.
Do you have one that you go to?
Well, I don't know if you've ever seen, have you ever seen like a little green Jesse Was Here? I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I use it a lot in my photos. So summer of 2009, right before he passed, we went on a family camping trip, all the kids, and we were we were, I don't even know how to explain it. It's Wisconsin, right? So you're up north, kind of hick. I don't know how to explain it. So the camping spot it was a makeshift shed that they kind of turned into a bar. So we're all inside because it's Wisconsin. You can bring your kids into bars. Yep. I shamelessly just told you that.
My brother lives in Wisconsin. Drinking beer is like the state sport, I think, isn't it? If not for the Packers, it would be like a legal thing. And so go. I'm sorry. So why not bring your kid to a bar? I live in Wisconsin. I understand. Go ahead.
So we're there, and the walls are this dark green, and the people that own the place give you these gold markers, and you can write all over. So there's writing on every single wall. And so I write on the wall, my daughter writes on the wall. And then there's, at the time it was 12-year-old Jesse, and he simply writes, Jesse was here on the wall. And why did I take pictures of him writing that? I have no idea, but it was this fun moment. He wrote Jesse was here. And so he passes away. And this is kind of a crazy story because it goes beyond just a favorite memory of Jesse, but that clearly was a favorite. And there's some reason why I took a picture, and I'm sitting with my brother and I said, oh my God, they're going to paint over that someday. Like every year, that's what they do. They just paint over,
start again.
And the new people that come to this campground write their new memories and thoughts. So I said to my brother, I need you to go up there and use part of the memorial fund to cut that out, and we'll redo it, and we'll whatever it takes. But I need to own that real estate, that piece of the wall. Mm-hmm. And he goes up there, and it's foreclosed. The bank foreclosed on it, so it's locked up. I'm not going to say how I got it, but that piece of real estate is in my living room, and it is something that every year on the anniversary of his death, which is February 3rd. So the number 23, I don't know if you've seen that, but 23 has become his number, and it's used all over the world because of February 3rd. And people changed their profile picture to that Jesse was here. And it's become kind of a movement. And, JDRS is even, mile 23 of every JDRF bike ride is a mile of silence in his honor. Artists have changed drawings and put 23 in it. And I own actually the 23rd print of something that they did in honor of Jesse. So I guess happiest memory is that I'm so glad that I have that piece of him that he wrote, and that people are inspired by that. But he was a goofy, funny damn kid. Like he was very contagious in his mannerisms and his way of dealing. Like, you'd have to walk through like a really crappy part of our city to get to school. Our subdivision kind of was in kind of a lower income area, and all the kids loved him. Like every kid would talk to him, and he'd talk about, if that kid wants to beat me up, I just say, hey, I brought some Cheetos. Want some Cheetos? He just had this way about him. And, there's still a plaque that hangs at his middle school about him and inspires others. And I'm just proud of who he was. I wouldn't give up one single day of those 13 years that I had with him.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's spectacular. And even as I asked the question, I was like, what a dumb question. Why would I say that?
No.
And then you answered, and I was like, wow, that worked out okay. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm just, we're up on an hour. I don't want to keep you any longer, but sure. I just genuinely appreciate that you came on and that you were so.
Thank you for having me on.
No, you're very welcome. Is there anything that you want people to know? I mean, is there a Facebook group, something that
the thing I guess is, if people are still listening to what I had to say, would be if you know of a family who loses to type 1 and you know them, the right thing to do is connect them, like with a group like mine, because man, I would have done anything to have my group when Jesse passed. I needed to know there were other people who stood in my shoes and understood. Don't try to fix them. I see some the DOC like try to manage those people, and we're here for you. And yeah, you're there for them, but like, don't make it about yourself and just pass them on to this group. Like, it's not even my group. It's not even my group. It's everybody's group. That's a parent who's lost, and connect them with me. I'm happy to, on Facebook, it's called Families of Type 1 Losses. And, it's only for the parents. So if I get a request from someone who's just wanting to see what we're talking about, they don't get added. It's definitely a place for the parents to breathe and have privacy and feel the hurt maybe a little bit.
Yeah, and people who have a very special set of tools that they can help you with, and they're not tools you have. So let them get to that. Families of type 1 loss?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you have a happy holiday, Merry Christmas, and your New Year is fantastic.
Have a great day, Scott.
You too.
Bye-bye.
A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. Breakthrough T1D, who of course formerly was the JDRF, put out a lovely blog post about the accident. I'd like to read it to you now. It says, the leadership, staff, and volunteers of Breakthrough T1D mourn the tragic sudden loss of 5 T1D champions on Friday, November 1st, 2024. That night, 5 people who were pillars of the Breakthrough T1D ride community died in a tragic single-car accident. The group included 2 married couples and 1 single individual, all very close friends and veteran Breakthrough T1D ride participants. All 5 people were inside the vehicle at the time, and there were no bicycles involved. Understandably, the tragedy sent shockwaves through the tight-knit ride community as well as the entire Breakthrough T1D organization. Chris Eaton, a lead volunteer partner for Breakthrough T1D Ride, and the Ride Advisory Council knew all 5 people well. Ride is the greatest group of people you wish you didn't need to know. Our friends embodied that feeling of inclusion, hope, and a steadfast focus on getting to a cure, said Chris. They will be sorely missed by their families, friends, and the ride community. Jeff and Michelle Bauer were highly involved in Breakthrough T1D Ride, especially Michelle. The Breakthrough T1D Ride program is a family, and Michelle exemplified this day in and day out, said Anthony Garashi, National Director, Ride and Endurance. Michelle has been a dedicated T1D advocate since her son Jesse was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2000 at the age of 3. Tragically and unexpectedly, Jesse passed away at the age of 13 on February 3rd, 2010. After Jesse passed away, Michelle continued to advocate, educate, and push the envelope in his name. In honor of Jesse, the date he died, and generally all people who have passed away from T1D, mile 23 of each Breakthrough T1D ride is ridden in silence. Whether it was riding thousands of miles in memory of her late son Jesse, authoring a book to help grieving families, bringing her husband Jeff Bauer into the ride family, to joining the Ride Advisory Council, Michelle was all in, Anthony added. In her spare time, Michelle had numerous other T1D focused projects, including Jesse Was Here, which encompassed her work with other families around the world who had lost loved ones to T1D. Jeff proposed to Michelle in 2018 at mile 23 of a Breakthrough T1D ride. The couple had a lake house in Wisconsin and spent a lot of time there. They were avid boaters. Jeff and Michelle are survived by their blended family of 5 children, Alexander Bauer, Claudia Bauer, Samantha Alswager, Joseph Alswager, and Sarah Alswager, all of whom are now adults. Josh and Tammy Stahl became close friends with the Bauers through the ride program. They rode together most recently in late August. Josh started riding in 2010 for his and Tammy's son Gavin, who is now 17, who lives with type 1 diabetes. Josh had competed in 13 rides, including Lake Tahoe, La Crosse, and Death Valley. I've been fortunate enough to talk to Josh and Tammy at rides over the decades, said Dan Wolf, executive director of Breakthrough T1D's Wisconsin chapter, who has long been involved with Ride. Most recently in La Crosse, where we traded stories of our Spirit jerseys, kids, and what makes the Ride program special, which are the friends you make along the way. Josh and Tammy are survived by their son Gavin Stahl and Blake Stahl. Barry Seaver's first ride was 10 years ago. He had completed 5 rides, including Nashville, Loveland, La Crosse. While he had no direct type 1 diabetes connection, he was always willing to help with a smile. He hosted training rides at his house and even helped transport bikes with his trailer. Barry's infectious smile and boundless energy embodied our Team Wisconsin spirit, wrote Joe Brady and Scott Hagan in a statement they issued together. Joe lives with type 1 diabetes, is a veteran ride coach. Scott is Barry's best friend, who recruited him for his first ride a decade ago. Barry was the senior financial manager of an Institute for Clinical and Translational Research at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. He is survived by his adult son, David, and 2 school-age daughters, Emma and Addison. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with another episode of the Juicebox podcast.